Welcome back to another week. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can see I am in my husband's office, and that is I have a fun story as to why, because our guest today is coming to us from Australia. So today it is 8:30 p.m. my time. It is 11:30 p.m. the next day where she is, and my children are asleep and my office is between them. So for those of you who are not watching, you're like, I don't care, Meg, I can't see you, but that's okay. All right, so I am elated. I have slid yet once again into somebody's DMs and asked them to come spend some time with me. And Jennifer Robertson was so kind to come and say yes. So Jennifer Robertson is a fertility coach and has helped women all over the world transform their mindset and take back control of their life in the midst of infertility. She is also the author of The Injustice of Infertility, a deeply inspiring and raw account of her own 7-year fertility journey. Throughout her own fertility journey, Jen discovered that her old ways of pushing and working hard weren't serving her. She is now using the lessons she learned along the way to develop programs and support women throughout their journey to motherhood, from the moment they start trying to conceive until they hold their baby in their arms. You can follow Jennifer on Instagram at Ms. Jennifer Robertson or Your Pregnancy Haven, and follow her website, jenniferrobertson.co or yourpregnancyhaven.co. And of course, I will have all of that in our show notes. Everyone, please welcome Jen. Hello.
Oh, what an intro.
Yes.
That's a
Yes.
mouthful. I'm
What?
so glad you reached out to me. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
It is such a pleasure. So I've been following you for, I like to start out the show by asking how we know each other. But of course, when I'm like, you don't know me, I just was like, hey, random person. But yeah, I've been following along and I really felt inspired most recently, which we'll get, or maybe we just jump right in, who knows. But when you had done a live talking about it's okay to say no to baby showers. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. She's got to come on my show.
I love it. And that is something that I am so passionate about. And it's something that every time I talk about it, there's a little bit of controversy.
Yes.
You really should go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so tough. It's really been interesting. I'd love to start out kind of learning about how you got into fertility coaching, and we can definitely make our way down all that path because it is, I feel like very few things today in our world are without controversy anyway, but certainly trying to conceive and boundaries and self-care definitely they toe that line. So, but how did you get into what made you decide to get into fertility coaching to begin with?
Well, I guess it was inspired by my own 7-year journey through IVF, surrogacy, miscarriage, pregnancy after loss, the whole gambit. And I don't think anything that can really prepare you for infertility or pregnancy loss or the struggles. You know it's out there, but it's always that thing of that happens to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I was totally unprepared, totally unequipped to deal with it. There was so much shame and guilt and struggle and so much stuff that it stole from me. And I always look at people and kind of go, I did it wrong. People always kind of like, oh, well, what did you do that was so fantastic? No, I did it. I feel like I did it the hard way. And so I became a fertility coach once I got out the other side and I was able to look back and go, oh, wow, I really made it so much harder for myself. There is a better way to be able to go through it. And also because I wanted to validate everything that everyone is going through on this journey as well, because I don't think that we do it enough.
Absolutely. Well, and I know because you mentioned the shame and the guilt of it, and it's something that I hear so much that I felt myself of like, my body is broken. What have I done wrong? And people asking, where are your kids? Why don't you have kids? You've been married for how long? And you don't, and it's so interesting that people still feel entitled to be able to ask such questions like, oh, when are you going to have a baby? And oh, you've been married for however many years. What's the next step? And it is interesting that shame internally and that guilt externally that people bring upon you is still pretty pervasive.
Oh, absolutely. And they're seemingly innocent questions
Mhm.
any other time. But as
Mhm.
soon as you are going through pregnancy loss or you're trying to conceive or anything like that, it's really a huge trigger, and it's a huge source of stress. So we shut ourselves off when we don't go out because we don't want to be triggered and we don't want to be asked the question.
Mhm.
So it's really, really tough. And I think it's important that we educate people. I don't often like telling people what they can and can't say, but it's just
Right,
about creating the awareness of, okay, you can ask this question. However, if
right.
someone is going through this, it is going to hurt them to their soul.
Mhm, mhm, absolutely. And, I think it's been interesting for me in my situation because I agree with you. I'm not in the business of censorship, right? I am in the business of trying to help people be empathetic and nurturing, right? And so it's not for us to say, don't say this. It's saying before you ask that question, ponder where you're coming from. Do you feel close enough to that person to be asking that question? It's not, hey, are you an Atlanta Falcons fan? Or I don't know. I'm trying to think of what's a famous Australian team. Now I'm struggling. Sports teams. I don't even know.
Yeah, yeah, the kangaroos.
Yeah, right. Sorry, I was like, I can't even think what an equivalent of an Australian team is. But you can ask something kind of innocuous, like a sports team or about the weather or whatever. But when you ask about a personal life choice, and two, I've got many friends, I've got some clients who have zero interest in reproducing, and there's a lot of shame and stigma around that too. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting that when we ask people questions, we think about why we're asking the question, right? Like,
Yeah. And a lot of the time it is to be able to connect with them,
mm-hmm,
but there are so many other ways that we can connect with people. I always say, if you wouldn't ask someone about their sex life, don't ask them when they're going to have a baby. You're essentially saying, hey guys, when you're going to have sex.
but literally,
Mm-hmm.
that was definitely in my trying to conceive journey, in my fertility struggles. I remember a lot basically having to express like, yes, my husband and I are having sex every other day around this window. Don't give us a call during this. It's like it's a very specific and prescriptive thing that you have to undertake. And yeah, I like that. If you wouldn't ask somebody about their sex life, then yeah, it's probably okay to not, like, hey, how are things going? Just ask some broad,
Mm-hmm.
how can I support you in your new marriage or whatever it might be, but not to go, yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at that and making sure that we set those boundaries. Cause yeah, if that's something that you feel comfortable talking about with, then yeah. And also too, being ready, I have actually had some people ask me and I've let them know about my pregnancy losses, and then they become and it's like,
Mm.
you asked, did you not want to know? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the thing when we do get asked that question, how do we respond? And it really does depend on, who's asking the question, how we're
uh-huh,
feeling in that moment,
uh-huh,
and what we kind of want to divulge as well, whether we want to. And here's the thing that we normally do: we normally shrink down
mm-hmm,
because we don't want to make the other person feel uncomfortable.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we lie, we push it down, we put on a fake exterior and a smile and walk away with our heart broken,
Yes,
all because we didn't want to make the other person feel uncomfortable.
that's exactly right. And I have had that conversation myself, with myself, and then with other people as well, of the setting, right? If somebody's trying to, you know, just be the nosy neighbor, is it really worth your energy, or is it worth, oh, one day, or, and if somebody, it really does depend on the moment. And then, like you said too, also too, sometimes we don't have the energy. Sometimes
Mm.
we're not emotionally in a space to be, sometimes I don't want to overuse the trigger word, but like I have been kind of shocked to the system, and I might have said something probably in a way that I had an extra moment or two to think about, I might have reconsidered, but I might have said something before about like, well, I've lost 2 babies already, so still trying. And then it's like, well, that was probably sassier than it needed to be, but it's also it's the answer to the question. And
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no, there's no need for you to feel bad for answering correctly with the truth.
Ah,
And yeah, absolutely. It's personal space, it's boundaries, it's, you know,
yes,
yeah.
yes,
And I think that
boundaries.
we find that as well when people get asked, like I have a pregnancy group as well called Your Pregnancy Haven, as you mentioned.
Mhm,
And there's a lot of, triggers when they are pregnant and people ask them, is this your first baby? I'm like, well, that's
mhm,
really complicated. Like, what are we classifying here? Like, yeah, I have two babies in heaven. So are you talking about, is this my first pregnancy, my first time this further along? Like,
right,
what are we talking about here? So
right,
another appearingly benign question, but
mhm.
it's not. It's complicated.
It's a yes, yes, and I'm so proud that we really are taking the space. Obviously, you and I are taking the space right now, and a lot of people are really taking up that space to continue to express the things that we feel are innocuous. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. I'll just ask if this is your first baby. Like, what could go wrong there? And absolutely, I think the more we educate, again, not to censor people, but allowing people to consider the possibilities of how that might impact somebody. Um, Absolutely, yeah. And so you said that you have groups. Tell me more about your groups that you're doing.
Yeah, so along with the fertility coaching, so I do one-on-one coaching with women mainly who are trying to conceive. I also have an online program that they can do. But yeah, I created Your Pregnancy Haven, it's been a couple of years ago, and I was finding that my clients were getting pregnant and then they no longer fit into the infertility community
Mm.
because of course they're pregnant and they don't want to go in there anymore, but they didn't quite fit into the I am pregnant and feeling completely joyful and hopeful right now
Yeah.
category either. So there was really nowhere for them to go, so I created this community, and with coaching and resources, and we have a doula inside. It's got a beautiful community chat in there, but it's a space that they can come through for the duration of their pregnancy and feel completely supported and validated in the fact that they feel more fear than joy in their
Mm,
pregnancy, because there is so much shame and guilt attached to that, because they have fought so hard to get to where they're pregnant, and they don't feel the fluffy hopeful
yeah,
feeling.
yeah.
They feel scared and negative, and aren't enjoying it.
Mhm. And I think that that might come as a shock to some people too, right? Especially if people who are not familiar with people with pregnancy issues and pregnancy crises and loss. Oh, you're pregnant. Yay, great. Don't you feel amazing? Isn't anything one? Oh, I'm sure the nausea is not great, but everything, but it's like, no, when you are just constantly in terror. Because we know, unfortunately, we all know too well that a lot of times, most of the time, there's nothing that we can do. Just take it a minute at a time, and it is such a tough space, so I'm so glad to hear, well, that we're sharing with the world that places like that do exist, where people can
Mm.
go, where they don't fully feel one, but they certainly are no longer fitting into the infertility category, um, and yeah, and then the guilt that comes along with that too, and being able to process through, like, "Why can't I enjoy this pregnancy more?" But, well, I think you've earned it.
Yeah, and this is the thing, like, it is all about validating. Pregnancy after loss is
Mm,
going to be different. It's
mhm,
going to look different, feel different. You're still triggered by pregnancy announcements. You don't want to announce to the world that you're pregnant. You don't want to have a baby shower because there's still a source of trigger. Like getting to the ultrasound appointments are like pulling teeth. It's
mm,
all about
mm,
validating that, like, it's different. It's different,
mhm.
and it's hard to break away from that. I should be feeling this or that
Yeah,
side of things. It's hard to break away from that picture that you've had in your head of this is what a perfect pregnancy looks like. But
mhm,
the reality is that it is different. And
mhm.
while it sucks, it's okay as well.
Yeah, yeah, and finding ways to make your way through that in a way that you feel supported and connected and, um, I talk a lot about with clients and with some of my students, like, it's not that we're trying to change our emotions, we're trying to change our relationship to the emotion and recognizing that. And instead of beating ourselves up or judging ourselves, I should be happy, I should be calm, I should be whatever it is that the world is telling you to be. It's like, no, this is where we are. And let's
Hmm.
sit with that tension and find ways to move forward, knowing that that's where we are, instead of fighting against it and fighting against ourselves.
Oh, there's so much struggle, isn't there? Like,
Mm,
I should be feeling this.
mm,
And I
yes.
think that, like, it just even saying sometimes, I'm scared,
Mhm.
and that's okay because this is important. That's
Yes.
it.
Yes. And I'm not going to fight against it. I'm not going to, that's it. And it's okay. And this is, yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned, and I won't go too deeply into my own story, but you even mentioned the ultrasound appointments, and that all kind of came flooding back to me, thinking about, um, how stressful those are, and the waiting in between, and the day of the appointment, the waiting for it to get there and driving there, and that moment and all of that is, um, yeah, it like I said, came flooding back to me very quickly, and those are the kind of things that can be helpful to kind of process through and, be able to recognize for sure.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going through is trauma, whether you are
Mhm.
trying to conceive naturally or whether you're going through IVF, whether you are pregnant after loss, what we have been through is traumatic. And, talking about the ultrasound appointment, I'm lucky enough to, well, not lucky, I work my butt off for it, but I'm very grateful for the fact that, I have a 6 and a 7-year-old.
Mhm.
And so my journey is clearly over, but I went for an ultrasound appointment for about a year ago for something completely unrelated. And I found myself in
Mm.
that room with the ultrasound equipment,
Yep.
and I was crying.
Yep.
And I was thinking to myself, what is going on? And that's trauma.
Mhm.
It's long lasting. It's
Mhm.
from everything that we're going through. And I think that we feel like we need to be strong and suck it up, but we
Mm.
really need to be able to look at it and go, do you know what? This is really hard. And what
Yes.
we're going through is grief as well,
Mhm.
month after
Mhm.
month, cycle after cycle. It's not just about the pregnancy loss or about a death or anything like that. This is you're grieving so much. You're grieving that picture that you had in your head of how things were going to turn out. You're grieving time of that picture in your head of I should have been this old,
Mhm.
when I
Mhm.
pictured being a mother, and now and in my case, now I'm breastfeeding at my 40th birthday party. Like,
Yes.
that's not the things that you pictured. So you're grieving a whole lot of stuff, and
Mm.
it creates a whole lot of trauma.
It really does. It really does. And I love that expression so much. Suck it up. Oh my goodness. But and it's tough because I feel I was going to ask you kind of from your social media perspective, but just in life in general, I feel like in the world today, there's just no right way to do anything. So whatever we do, someone's got something to say about something. So, if you're frustrated from the loss of the things, the death of the dream that you did have, and whatever that capacity is, someone's here to tell you, well, at least something else, or that's probably one of my least favorite pregnancy, parenting, trying to conceive, at least.
Hmm.
Um,
Anything that starts with just do this, no, don't do that.
right?
Anything that starts with at least this, no, don't do that.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people told me to just start doing yoga. Just start doing yoga. You get pregnant.
Just get drunk. Just
Just
stop trying. Just
yeah.
relax. Like,
Oh,
really?
just stop trying is the one I think that really got me. I'm like, math is not, it's counting, you all. It's like 28 days. Like, when you're fertile, like, it's not hard. Plus cervical mucus is very obvious. These are things that when you are trying to conceive, that you can't erase those memories from your brain. They are there.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to stop trying, or, oh, somebody told me once to adopt. I was like, well, that's offensive on a number. Like, adoption is a beautiful and lovely thing. Don't use it as a means to get pregnant. And yeah,
Just do
yes.
IVF. Like, there's nothing just about IVF.
Okay. First of all, in the United States, at least, it's like at least $10,000 to $15,000. Some insurances are starting to cover reproductive fertility treatments, which is good, but generally speaking, it's mostly out of pocket. So even from a financial perspective, from the injections that are egg retrieval, I mean, y'all, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And the at least thing, I wish that we could, I again, not in the business of censorship, but I would love if we could erase that from our vernacular. Well, at least the, okay. Well, now you're just
Mm-mm.
invalidating everything that I've tried to tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how has that been for you on like the social media platforms? How have you felt opening up, sharing your stories, sharing your experiences, sharing your encouragements, the things that you've learned? I mean, you talked about I did it wrong. So now you're trying to encourage people like this is what did not work for me. Here are some things to try. How have you felt that the social media world has received and supported?
Yeah, look, you know what? I feel like they are very supportive.
Good.
They are very passionate. I'm mainly over on Instagram, so I feel like the infertility community are really over there in droves. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, you know, it's that saying of hurt people hurt people. So of
Mm,
course, you know, there are going to be some comments. You can't please everyone when you
really.
show up. So I've had to develop a little bit of thick skin, but
Mm-hmm.
also try to be a lot more sensitive. And sometimes there are people that call me out on some of the stuff that I put out there, and I really appreciate it. I
Sure.
really do. As long as it's in a nice way, as long as they're kind about it and kind of call me out on something that I've put in there. Like that's the way that we grow and evolve
Mhm.
and you know, we get to change
Yeah.
our minds and we feel this one day and then we might change our mind and have another view the next time. But the thing that I try to do always is show up and be as real as possible. I
Yeah.
don't I don't want to fake it. I like to just say it how it is,
Mhm.
and you know, without obviously trying to hurt anyone. But I really enjoy it. I love showing up there. I love sharing the lessons that I learned and my story and things like that. So yeah, it's quite well received. I have, you know, some beautiful followers and supporters out there, which I am very grateful for.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And I'm glad to hear that too, that there are people who feel that they can give it a differing perspective or alternate information for you to ponder in ways that can help us all grow and learn and heal together. Certainly we all have commentators who are maybe not as polite or kind, but I do always like to I like to be able to open my mindset, my worldview, something that I hold to be an absolute truth. Somebody else can give me information that I just didn't know existed or didn't have a way of looking at it in that way. And then I can be more open to be able to help other people and support them as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as long as it's dealt with kindness, then of course you're going to be open to receiving that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did want to talk because this is the one that I was thinking about, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on when you're trying to conceive baby showers. What
Mm.
what do we think? What are our thoughts?
Well, I'm very clear on this stance.
Yes.
You don't have to go.
Yes.
And it's not a popular stance. I remember a little while ago, I put out a post that said, you don't have to go to that baby shower. And I was really disappointed and shocked by the number of women who were coming on there and going, yeah, you should. Why on earth would you be so selfish in someone else's happiness? Why would you do that? And I was like, oh my goodness. And very rarely do I kind of say you're wrong.
Right.
But in this case, I was like, you're wrong.
Hmm.
I just don't care. And it's, you know, we label it as you're being selfish. Whereas I like to reframe it as no, 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 this is self preservation.
Mm.
Self preservation is
Hmm.
not being selfish. And when you have someone who is pregnant, they're happy. Well, you know, most of the time.
Sure.
Yes, assuming that they are happy. And then you have you who is going through infertility, going through some really hard times, and you're suffering. And so we are told then, no, you need to put that other person's happiness, who are already happy, above your own. And if you don't do that, you're selfish.
Mm-hmm.
I just find that attitude really disappointing, especially in the path that you're going through. Infertility is the hardest thing that I have ever been through. I have lost my father to cancer. I've lost my sister, died a few years ago. I've been through a divorce. I've been through a lot of stuff, but going through infertility, fertility struggles, pregnancy loss, pregnancy after loss, that's hands down the hardest thing that I have ever been through. And yet here we are saying to people in the hardest time of your life, and they've done studies that compare the anxiety that you have with infertility with that of cancer patients. And I have had that validated with a lot of my audience who, when I put up posts that compare it, they're like, yes, I have had cancer. I have gone through infertility. Infertility is harder. And so we are telling women at the hardest time of their life, I'm sorry, you're being selfish for looking after yourself. You have to put someone else's needs above your own. It just, it pisses me off, So here is the time in your life where you get to look after yourself first for self-preservation. Now, I have the view that you really should be looking after yourself first anyway, regardless of what you're going through. But in this circumstance, you've got a free pass in my book.
Yeah. Well, and we talk all the time about you can't fill with an empty cup, right? And so we should be looking at ourselves. And I like this self-preservation. I have had this conversation so many times with so many people, and I've never done any legwork on it at all. But we need a new definition of selfish. Selfish, like you hate, United States football, and I love United States football. You don't, I'm just saying. And I force you to watch it all day, even though I know for a fact that you hate it. That's a bad selfish, right? Like there's no compromise, there's no concerning about, right? Fine. That's a bad selfish. But taking care of yourself, self-preservation, preserving your ability to function, not humiliating yourself in front of other people by sobbing in the middle of someone's baby shower, or whatever else may or may not happen. That's taking care of yourself. We say it all the time. You can't pour from an empty cup. How are we helping ourselves to feel full and able to nurture each other if we're forcing people to put themselves in situations where they know they're not going to feel comfortable? That doesn't mean you have a free pass to fully ignore that friend, but perhaps you could take them to lunch and celebrate.
Yeah, or send them a gift, or a little note.
Yes,
absolutely.
To whatever extent you feel. But these societal norms and customs that we've created, which, I mean, I had a baby shower with my firstborn and it was lovely and I cherished the moment. So I say that with that, not sitting on that place of privilege, but I'm saying if somebody came to me and was saying, Meg, I'm really having issues with my fertility journey and I'm just not gonna be able to make it. I obviously I work in this space, so it's easy for me to say, but I just can't imagine somebody being like, no, it's really about me right now and I need you to be there. And like, okay, so are we friends then?
Yes. And I think that, when you're on this journey as well, it really does show us the people who are there for us at the same level and the people who are just there taking from us. Because when you get on this journey, you have nothing more to give. And so then hanging out with certain people who just expect you to give and give and give, you just can't do it anymore. And I think sometimes we look at the friendships that we lose along the way as a result of this journey. And I think that sometimes it sounds really weird me saying this, sometimes that can be a good thing, but because I think that this shows us the people who are there for us and the people who can support us and who are compassionate and who are at the same level, and our friendships are based on give and take. Because when you're on this journey, like, it's very clear the people who are just taking from you. and we have to let
Absolutely.
them go.
Absolutely. And I think it's hard for us because we think about like, oh no, we're going to be friends forever and everything's going to be amazing. And I think sometimes we grow apart. We grow,
Hmm.
our priorities change, our values shift at times, our perspectives certainly do so. And recognizing that, again, this isn't permission to be disrespectful to a pregnant person because, somebody on a Facebook post had written something about not allowing other people's victories to become your trigger. And I think that is very important, right? So it's not that your baby shower and your success in being a fertile human is a trigger for me to then allow me carte blanche to act as I please, but it is a space for me to be able to say that situation is somewhere where I do need to remove myself. How else can I support you in a way that's meaningful for you? And hoping that that person is able to recognize how important that is. So the same as it's not, oh, I'm pregnant, I get to do whatever I want. Everyone has to come bow down to me. Right. So making sure that
Yeah,
we're
it's still about being a good human being.
that's
But
exactly right.
like there are the triggers on this journey, and pregnancy announcements and
Mm,
things like that. And I think that it is really hard to separate out a good thing has happened to someone else
yes.
and it hasn't happened to me. And I
Yes.
think our natural reaction is, oh my goodness, I am a bad person because this person just announced their pregnancy and I
Yes.
feel like I want to cry
Yes.
right now.
My first
And
reaction
so
was
we
not joy for them, and I am a horrible human being. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And I think a lot of people, kind of like, well, I don't know why you can't separate it. Like it's not like it's happening to you. Like it can't you be happy for someone else and sad for yourself? It's not that easy to be
Right.
able to separate it out, because what happens is when we get that trigger, when we open our social media feed and you see the 10th pregnancy announcement
Mm,
today,
mm-hmm.
like it triggers something in you, and it triggers all of the trauma, all of the things that you have gone through, all of the sadness, all of the grief, whether you've gone through IVF cycles. In that one moment of seeing that pregnancy announcement, you go through everything that you've been through. Like, of course, we
Yes.
think about of everything
Yeah.
that we've been through.
Mm-hmm.
So we confuse the fact of, like, there's a joyful time in someone's life. I'm really sad. I am sad for me, but it gets mixed up in the
Yes.
wash.
Yeah, yes, and that's a good way of putting it. Absolutely. It's not they're not two discrete things. Okay, let me tend to this piece and then I'm going to tend to that piece, and it is interwoven, mixed up in the wash is a great way of describing that. Absolutely. It's it's always been tough to that. We go back to as we were just talking about ultrasounds, and I have a 1 and a 3-year-old, and your children are even older than that, and yet the mention of an ultrasound, like the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and you talked about having been for a completely different medical procedure, and yet you're crying. And so it is those things where I think I remember, if I may, when I was in my fertility struggle, I think I remember knowing 7 relatively close humans to me being pregnant at the same time, and I just thought, of course I'm happy for them, and also why not me? And I
Mm,
guess maybe that makes me a selfish person. I don't see it that way. I certainly I know you don't either. Um,
no.
and it's so hard because, like you say, you open social media and post after post after this after that, and it's a lot. And I think if we can all just try to give, the most important thing is for us to give ourselves grace, and that's very difficult to do. I wish that
Hmm.
other people would give each other grace, particularly people who have not experienced, I guess, if they haven't walked through the journey and can't sympathize, that perhaps they could have some empathy and be able to say, I don't know what you're going through, but you're telling me that it's really difficult for you. How can I support you? Or I'm sending you a box of Cheez-Its through Grubhub, or, I don't know. But um,
Yeah.
instead of placing that judgment, because
Hmm.
again, it's all about grace and growth, and absolutely. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and we are our harshest critic. I think
Mm,
that's half the suffering that we put ourselves through, is that the punishment. I should feel
yeah.
this. I'm a
Yeah.
bad person because I feel that.
Yeah. Absolutely. We got to get rid of that word should too. Look, I'm taking all kinds of words out of the English language today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, we say don't shit on yourself because truly it's a judgment. It's
I
a
love that.
judgment. Yeah.
Yeah.
My field placement supervisor and my second field placement said that, and I was like, okay, that's hilarious. And yes. So I've stolen that from her
Mm-hmm.
for sure. I've definitely
Yes,
co-opted it.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yes, yeah. So I was curious. I mean, of course, everyone's got a very unique journey. Everyone's situation is so different, but I was just wondering if there were some kind of common themes and takeaways you've noticed in working with people in fertility issues that might be helpful for the listeners to hear about.
Yeah, I guess one of the big ones is the fact that it consumes you. Like all
Mhm.
of a sudden, there was life before trying to conceive, and now you're in the middle of it, and it does consume everything. Your job is not fulfilling anymore. It's merely a means to earn some money for your next treatment. Like
Oh,
you put your life on hold. You're not going on holidays anymore because you might be in a cycle, or what if you're
yes,
pregnant, or all of
yes,
those different things. Your relationships change as well because it affects your friendships and those who you can hang around. You don't want to go out and be social because you're so exhausted. So all of these different elements that we have are changed, and we change our diet, we change our
mm,
lifestyle, we Google for our hobby, that's what we do. And so it really does consume you, mind, body, and spirit. And I think that that's probably one
mm,
of the big things, like the goal of having a baby, it's no longer a want, it becomes a
yes,
need
yes.
and an obsession. And it's really hard when you're sitting in the middle of it to be able to pull yourself back out. It's like
Mhm.
those, I always liken it to, those little babushka dolls that you have, and it's just kind of like you have them all, like all aspects of your life, like
Yes,
sitting out, and then they all get piled on top of each other, and you're left with this one doll at the end.
yes.
And so it's really hard once you're in that consumption. You then have to work really hard to be able to unpack it, instead
Oh
of
my gosh.
every single goal on every in single aspect of your life has become to have a baby. I'm
Yes,
working to have a baby.
yes,
I'm eating like this to have a baby. I'm cutting out alcohol to have a baby. I'm like taking my
yes,
supplements to have a baby. And so like that's the one goal. And we have to, like, what I work through with my clients is a way to, okay, let's unpack this.
mhm,
How can we, yes, the ultimate goal is, yes, you do want to have a baby, but what else do we need to be doing? Like, how do you recreate the life that,
mhm,
not that
mhm.
you had, but just recreate a different life? Like, how do you live inside of this? And I think that we put our whole life on hold when we're in the middle of it. Just kind of like, I just need to run. I just need to get there. And once I get out the other side, then I'll deal with all of the stuff that happened. And that's exactly what I did. Like, I just pushed
Yes,
it all down. It was like, I'll deal with that on the other side. It took me
yes.
7 years. So that's 7 years of suffering and
Mhm,
being completely consumed by it.
mm.
And it's really hard. So yes, number one is being consumed. That's a big thing.
Yes. Oh my goodness gracious. And the simile of it being like a babushka doll for our US listeners, we call those nesting dolls.
Oh,
I knew what you're talking about. And also you described it well enough, but just in case anybody else was still curious, I love that so much. I am stealing it because you're so right. All of these other pieces, and they're all within this like, this is the one though that I see, that I can feel, that I can put my visual, my focus, my gaze is on that, and that's it. And everything else is still in there, and I know it's in there. I can, I can rattle it and hear it, but that's not, and that is so interesting about the idea of working to unpack that. What a great way of describing that. Absolutely. Wow.
And I think the
Meaningful.
longer that you're on the journey, like, I mean, it's horrible no matter how long you've been trying to conceive, but the
Mhm.
longer you're on the journey, the more, that's all you're focused on.
Yeah.
So you wake
Yeah.
up one day and look in the mirror and it's kind of like, what just happened? Well, like,
Yes.
what, I don't even remember what I like anymore, or who I am, or
Mhm.
anything
Mhm.
beyond my goal of trying to
Yes.
trying to have a baby.
Like, where
And
did I go? I have lost
yeah,
myself to this
yes,
process. And
100%.
yeah. Absolutely. And then of course, then you kind of catastrophize too easily, I think, to say, and then I'm gonna have this baby, and then my life is gonna be focused on them. So when it's all kind of that piece, all of those pieces together and making sure, yeah, like you said, unpacking that and making sure that we do take time to sort that out and give ourselves grace and focus on our own self-preservation.
Because
Wow.
yeah, it doesn't go away the moment that you get pregnant. In
It is
fact, it
not.
amplifies. And then it doesn't go away again the moment you get your baby in your arms. And I learned that the hard way. It
Mhm,
doesn't go away. Like you need
mhm,
to actually do some work to heal it, to acknowledge it, to
mhm.
to get through the trauma. And it's so much harder when you keep on like packing stuff into it. By the time you get to the end, you've got this backpack on your back, and it's just so filled with undealt with emotions and grief and all of those different things,
Yes.
that then you have to unpack it at the end, and you're already spent because fingers crossed you've got a baby in your arms, and
Mhm.
and then you've got motherhood, so it's really hard to unpack it then. So it's so much easier.
Uh-huh.
Okay, it's not easy, but
Right.
it's easier to be able to, unpack all of that stuff as you're going through the process.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Powerful, powerful stuff, Jen. I can't thank you so much. I literally can't thank you enough for taking the time to chat with me, for sharing your stories and your views. Just strong and lovely information for everybody to have. I did already tell everyone, if you want to share with us again, and I will of course put the show notes where everyone can find you, please.
Oh, well, you can find me over on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most, on Ms. Jennifer Robertson. Or if you are pregnant after infertility or loss, you can find me at Your Pregnancy Haven over on Instagram. Websites are exactly the same as well, but .co. So I also have a free resource that you can download depending on where you're at on your fertility journey. So if you go to those websites, there's some tips on how to reduce your stress and boost your fertility or enjoy your pregnancy a little bit more over on there as well.
Amazing. I literally can't thank you enough. What a treat, what a joy. I really appreciate it. I wanted to share with the listeners. I actually learned something this week. So, Jen, I like to end my podcast with be curious, not judgmental. That's my encouragement for everybody. And I heard it. Have you heard of Ted Lasso, the TV show?
I have, but I've never watched, and I need to because everyone keeps on talking about it.
Okay, so I will evangelize. It's like free therapy. It's just it was written with it's like I obviously love sports because I've mentioned a number of times, but it's not about football. Apparently it's like a workplace comedy is what it's supposed to be, but there is some soccer involved or football. And in it, Jason Sudeikis' character, Ted Lasso, quotes, I'm using air quotes for those on the podcast, Walt Whitman, be curious, not judgmental. Well, Walt Whitman never said that, but I've been saying it on this podcast for like a year. And I just saw that in an interview. So I just wanted to share that with the listeners that I did officially say, like Ted said, Walt said, be curious, not judgmental. And Ted did say Walt did say that, but Walt never did say that. So in case anybody was curious, Jen, please go watch Ted Lasso. Feel free. We can text about it. And anyway,
Absolutely.
but to everybody, truly do, whether or not Walt Whitman said it, be curious, not judgmental. Make it a good one.